That we're not threatening that we will be using nuclear weapons. Don't get that wrong. Well, because nuclear war in the present world will be a suicide for everyone. We are using our we're not using, we're just saying that we are prepared to defend ourselves, because the weapons that we have, nuclear weapons, they are not for attacking anyone, they're for defending ourselves. We're hearing so much aggression, aggressive statements from the West. We're prepared to defend ourselves, not to, being mad or suicidal. I'm pretty sure if we didn't have nuclear weapons, I mean Russia, we would have shared the fate of Yugoslavia or Libya long ago.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam damai sejahtera buat kita semua. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, dan salam kebajikan dan salam sehat buat kita semua. Saya Fabi Mahendra saat ini berada di kediaman Duta Besar Federasi Rusia di Jakarta, Madam Lyudmila Georgievna Vorobieva. Mohon maaf kalau pengucapan saya kurang tepat, tetapi saya sekarang sudah bersama dengan Madam Lyudmila.
First of all, thank you very much for wanting to know Russian position on what is happening between Russia and Ukraine, because now basically all the Western media, they are just translating the position of the Western countries and Ukraine. So thank you once again. First of all, I would like to say that we're not conducting a war against the people of Ukraine. We see Ukrainians as our brothers and sisters. Yes. And I can tell you, I was born in Ukraine. I'm not Ukrainian, I'm Russian, but it just had to highlight how close we are. My grandparents are buried in Kiev. So we are not conducting a war against the people of Ukraine. Yeah. We are conducting a special military operation to protect the people of Donetsk and Lugansk, to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. This didn't start on the 24th of February. It started quite a long time ago. In 2014, illegitimate and criminal government came to power in Kiev as a result of a coup d'etat. And this government was supported by Western countries. And immediately this government adopted a very Russophobic, anti-Russian stance. And I don't mean just against Russia as their neighbor, but against their own people who see themselves as Russian ethnically, but who live in Ukraine. The first thing they did, they tried to adopt a law to ban Russian language from being used. And I don't mean just in schools to study or as official language, but just to talk in the shops, to use it in everyday life. Imagine this happening in Ireland if you tried to ban English, or in Belgium if you tried to ban French language, or in Indonesia if you tried to ban Javanese language in Java. How would people react?
Yes.
So, but not only it was a cultural oppression, it was a physical also threat.
Physical assault.
Assault at Russians that didn't want this to happen. And at that time the West turned a blind eye. They didn't want to see or hear what was happening in Ukraine. Not many people know, but for us in Russia it was a really shock when 38 people were burned alive in Odessa. They were peaceful protesters against the new regime in Kiev. They were shot in a government building, and this building was burned. They were burned alive, and the criminals are still not prosecuted. We all knew that, but the Western media never reported it.
Yes.
So regions that were predominantly Russian, like Donetsk, Lugansk, and Crimea, they refused to accept this kind of treatment and this kind of regime. With Crimea, you know what happened? Crimea rejoined Russia, and Lugansk and Donetsk started to oppose the government, and the government sent troops against these people, and they were killing them for 8 years. Why it was not reported in the Western media? In 2014, Russia didn't acknowledge the independence, didn't recognize the independence of these two republics. We tried to help solve this problem in a diplomatic way by urging the leadership of Donetsk and Lugansk and Kiev to sit together and sign the Minsk Agreement. We were the initiators of the Minsk Agreement. And the Minsk Agreement actually pointed out a very clear way to solve this problem inside Ukraine, because this was civil war when the government is attacking their own nationals. So the Minsk Agreements were signed in 2014, supported by Russia, supported by Western countries as well. And for 8 years, we've been trying to push Kiev to fulfill these agreements. One of the main points of this agreement was that Kiev would give a special status to Lugansk and Donetsk regions inside Ukraine. If these agreements would have been fulfilled, the problem would have solved inside Ukraine, and the territorial integrity of Ukraine would have been preserved. But the Kiev government, the criminal and neo-Nazi government of Kiev, I'm not telling, we're not against Ukrainian people. But the government was criminal, supported by the West. They chose not to follow these agreements, but to attack persistently. You know how many people died during these years in Lugansk and Donetsk? There are different estimates. From one estimate is 2,500, from others is 14,000. But anyway, it means every day people were dying there, every single day. And we were trying diplomatically to solve this problem. We were providing humanitarian assistance to these regions, but we never recognized their independence until recently. And at the same time, during these 8 years, the West tried to turn Ukraine into an anti-Russian project.
Anti-Russian project.
Anti-Russian project, and use Ukraine as a political and military instrument to attack Russia. In 1991, we were promised that NATO will not expand. The West did not fulfill this commitment, but we repeatedly told the West that we have our red lines, and the red line is that Ukraine becomes member of NATO. Why? You ask me why?
Yes, why?
Yeah, because Ukraine is our neighbor. We have a very long border with Ukraine, and NATO would have brought their military infrastructure to our borders. How can we not feel threatened? Because NATO, whatever they say, is a very aggressive alliance. You remember Yugoslavia? You remember Libya? You remember Iraq?
And Afghanistan?
And Afghanistan, of course. So how could we not feel threatened that NATO is willing to bring their missiles to the border with Russia? It's not Russia that are bringing missiles to the border of the US, to Canada or Mexico. It's NATO, led by the US. They are bringing their military infrastructure close to our border. So that's why in December last year, finally, we addressed US and allies and NATO and gave them our requests to guarantee our security. We even drafted an agreement that would have written guarantees for our security in Europe. Actually, we wanted to solve this all in a diplomatic way. They rejected it. They didn't give the answer to our main concern, just several. And at the same time, they were pumping Ukraine with the military equipment, training their army, brainwashing their young people.
Yes.
So the situation became very threatening to us. We exhausted all the means to solve this situation diplomatically. And you remember that there was information war. It doesn't start just on the 24th of February. It started many years ago when the West were launching an information war against Russia. Well, our minister called it information terrorism. Whatever happened in the world, bad, Russia was behind it. No proof, no evidence, but just accusing us of everything happening. So our president has taken the decision, first of all, to recognize the independence of these two regions, Lugansk and Donetsk. And afterwards, there was a treaty on amity and cooperation signed with these two republics, which provides also for military assistance. Okay. And the leaders asked us for military assistance to help them free these two countries from Ukrainian army. Yeah. That's what actually we are doing. We are helping Donetsk and Lugansk to free their territory from Ukrainian army and stop the war that has been going on for 8 years. It didn't start on the 24th of February.
Madam Ambassador, apa syarat yang diajukan pemerintah Rusia supaya terjadi gencatan senjata dan perundingan dilakukan secara diplomasi?
Well, as you know, there are talks. We agreed to have talks with the Ukrainians. The first round of talks took place some time ago, a couple of days ago, in Belarus. Yes. And I don't know the details, they were not disclosed, but according to what the head of our delegation said, that it was a useful meeting. There was some points that the sides identify that could consist a compromise. And the most important thing, they decided to meet again. So probably today there will be a second round of talks. And one of the topics could be the ceasefire. Ceasefire. But as our president stated, our main goal is to demilitarize, and we can do it with different ways. We hope.
Madam Ambassador, menurut perkiraan Anda, apakah perang ini akan berlarut-larut dan sampai menjadikan perang dunia ketiga atau tidak?
I'm not a military expert. I just can say what we wish for. We wish for this conflict to end as soon as possible, because we don't want Ukrainians or Russians to suffer. We don't want civilians to suffer. You know, our Ministry of Defense stated many times that we are not targeting civilians. We're targeting only military infrastructure in Ukraine. We're being very careful. One of the military experts said that we're tiptoeing into Ukraine. You know, you remember what Americans did. They had these carpet bombings first, where when they invaded many foreign countries. We just named a few, but actually there were much more. Carpet bombing the country, destroying everything, like they did in Yugoslavia, destroying everything, civilian schools, hospitals, bridges, and then rolling in. That's not the way our military forces are doing it. They're being very carefully not to harm civilians. If a city is surrounded, there is always a humanitarian passage being open, and everyone can leave. Everyone who wishes can leave. But the Ukrainians are preventing that. They're using the civilian population as human shields. And that is terrible, of course. So from our point of view, this conflict should be resolved as soon as possible, but not until the targets that we are setting could be achieved.
Madam Ambassador, apakah menurut Anda mungkin nggak Presiden Putin kemudian menggunakan nuclear weapon?
No, we're not threatening anyone to use, or that we're not threatening that we will be using nuclear weapons. Don't get that wrong. Well, because nuclear war in the present world will be a suicide for everyone. We are using our we're not using, we're just saying that we are prepared to defend ourselves, because the weapons that we have, nuclear weapons, they are not for attacking anyone, they're for defending ourselves. We're hearing so much aggressive statements from the West. We're prepared to defend ourselves, not to being mad or suicidal. I'm pretty sure if we didn't have nuclear weapons, I mean Russia, we would have shared the fate of Yugoslavia or Libya long ago.
Yeah.
So we are just defending ourselves. We are not threatening anyone with nuclear or any other weapon.
Apa pendapat Madam Ambassador terkait dengan beberapa demonstrasi di kota-kota di Rusia untuk menyuarakan stop war?
Well, it's absolutely understandable. The emotional reaction, of course, for any normal person, war is a tragedy. And we Russians, we know this more than anyone. During World War II, we suffered a lot. Every family was affected by war. Of course, it's an emotional reaction to that. People are not very, some people, I would say, they don't know much about politics. They hear war, of course they react. It's a normal human reaction. And of course people have the right to express their feelings. But I can assure you that majority of Russian people support the decision of President Putin, because we want peace. We want to live with Ukrainians as our good neighbors in peace and stability. We don't want to see Ukrainians as our enemies, or for Ukrainians to see Russian as the enemies. It's not normal. It cannot last forever. And if you want to blame someone for what is happening, you should blame Washington, Brussels, and Kiev, who were doing everything to continue the war in Donbass and in Donetsk and Lugansk. And the West, who was sparing no efforts to turn Ukraine into, as our president said, anti-Russia.
Yes. Madam Ambassador, apa yang pemerintah Rusia harapkan dari pemerintah Indonesia untuk membantu menyelesaikan konflik ini?
Well, first of all, we see Indonesia as our good partner and friend for many years. We've been cooperating so well. We have a long history of traditional good relations in the 60s, especially when President Sukarno visited our country 4 times. The song Rayuan Pulau Kelapa became very well known in Russia. It was translated into Russian because of the visit of President Sukarno. There was a documentary made on Indonesia, and Rayuan Pulau Kelapa was the soundtrack for this documentary. So that's why many people in Russia know this song in Russia. Actually, the title of the song in Russian is "Indonesia, My Love."
Yes.
So that reflects the very warm sentiments and that people of Russia have towards Indonesia. And of course we hope that this situation will not affect our relations. Why should a situation in a third country affect our good bilateral relations? So I hope that we will continue to cooperate with Indonesia, and we've seen very positive trends. Even despite COVID, last year our trade has increased by 40%.
Yes. Madam Ambassador, saya mau bertanya ini, bagaimana reaksi pemerintah Rusia dan Anda sendiri menghadapi sanksi ekonomi yang dilakukan oleh negara-negara Barat?
Well, according to the statement by our President and our Prime Minister, our economy has a very high level of resilience. And in a certain way, we were prepared for this kind of things because we are under sanctions since 2014. More than 80 rounds of sanction have been imposed. And you remember President Obama saying that our economy will be in shreds, but it never happened. In fact, last year we had a GDP growth, despite COVID, by 4%. And of course, we think it's absolutely illegitimate. And what we see that these sanctions, this reaction of the West is quite hysterical, I would say. Because by this sanction, they are not just trying to hurt Russia, but they're hurting themselves. Europe is very much dependent on Russia for energy, oil and gas.
Yes.
You see what is happening with the prices. But, you know, this is, they're not thinking logically, you know. You see how well, the best word is hysterical reaction is. They are even prepared to hurt themselves in this very illogical desire to hurt Russia. And of course, the main, what is the main, if you ask, what is the main target of the sanctions? Yeah, to make government change the policy. That's what they say.
Yes, yes.
That's what they say. Okay, if it's true, what have it ever ended in a government changing its policy when the sanctions were applied? Iran?
Yeah, no.
North Korea? Russia? No. So that is illogical. Then, okay, now what we see, they're not trying to hurt the government, they're trying to hurt the people. And not only, I mean, economically, but they are trying to prevent, for instance, our sportmen attending the Paralympics. So impaired people who've been training, they were trying to prevent them from attending the Paralympics. Where are the human rights, or preventing cultural contacts, or preventing human contacts? So if they're trying to hurt the people, that means they want the people to get angry and to topple the government? Is that the aim? Of course it will not happen, because as I told you, our people, big majority, they support the decision by President Putin. And at the end, if you look what happened after 2014, you know, first of all, our economy adapted. And even in some sense it gained, because before 2014, we were not sufficient in food products. For instance, we depended on the West for imports of food. After 2014 and the sanctions, we developed our agriculture sector. There were a lot of investment. The government had special programs to develop agriculture. So now, if you go to a Russian shop, you will see that, you know, there's so many products produced in Russia, and it's cheaper and it's better in quality. Well, of course, some. And we became #1 exporter of wheat in the world, which never happened. I'm not saying that the sanctions will not hurt. They will, of course, they will. And they will, but they will hurt not only Russia, they will hurt the global economy.
Global economic.
On the other hand, why is the West thinking that they are the whole world? They are not. Because new centers of powers are emerging in the world. The world is becoming a multipolar place, and that's what the West don't agree with. They cannot recognize that it's happening. China, ASEAN countries, including Indonesia, of course, Latin American countries, Russia, that are the new centers of powers, and that's what the West cannot agree with, because these people are used to dominate the world For 500 years, they've been dominating the world, colonizing Indonesia. You know that very well. They've been colonizing the world. They were pumping national resources from the colonies. That's why they are so prosperous, not because they worked so hard, but because they exploited the colonies. And now they are not prepared to lose and to let go this dominance. Yeah. That's why they are so hysterical, because the whole world set is changing now.
Yes. Oke, Madam Ambassador, tadi Anda mengatakan ada beberapa saudara-saudara Anda yang masih berada di Ukraina. Bisa diceritakan bagaimana kondisi mereka saat ini?
I don't have close relatives anymore, unfortunately. Yes, because my grandfather and my grandmother who lived, they died a long time ago, and my father who grew up in Ukraine, he also passed away quite recently. So I don't have close relatives living in Ukraine. But for every Russian, what has been happening in Ukraine for 8 years, it really hurt. Because we're so close. We are like, people from, I don't know, Jakarta and Yogyakarta. Yeah. Yes. So there's a slight difference in language, but basically we're very, very close. So we want peace and stability be restored in Ukraine. We don't want Ukrainians to see us as our enemies. We don't feel that there is a threat coming from Ukraine. How would you feel in Java if there was threat coming from Bali?
Yes.
It's an impossible situation. It's absolutely, or from, I don't know, from Kalimantan. It's impossible situation. It cannot last forever. And once again, if you want to blame someone from that, blame the Western influence and the Western countries that were trying to turn Ukraine into anti-Russian instrument.
Baik, Madam Ambassador, apa yang bisa Anda jelaskan mengenai munculnya ledakan-ledakan bom di kota Kiev pada hari ini dan kemarin?
Well, I cannot. I don't have any inside information, but I can just cite you the statements by our Ministry of Defense. There are some military installations outside Kiev, and they were targeted by our precise arms. We've opened a humanitarian passage for ordinary people from Kiev, so they can leave. They can leave quite safely. We know for a fact that the government in Kiev has distributed a lot of arms to just ordinary people and even criminals who were released from prisons. We know that the Ukrainian army is using civilians as a life shield. They are placing the tanks and missiles inside the residential quarters. As I told you, we are not targeting civilians. We want to spare the more civilians we can, even the military people. If they are ready to put down their arms and surrender, they can return to the families. They will not be persecuted. So we don't want Ukrainians to die. We want them to live and to be our good neighbors and friends.
Last question, apakah ada yang ingin Ibu Ambassador sampaikan untuk closing statement?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, we don't want war. We want peace. And the military operation was the last resort to prevent a bigger war from happening, because what we were seeing in Ukraine was a threat to our security. And in the long run, the threat to the European security as well. We didn't want this to happen. We resorted to diplomatic means for many, many years. We were asking the West to be realistic. They didn't want to hear us. And as you say in Indonesia, Rusia tidak mau perang.
Oke. Terima kasih.
Tidak mau perang.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Para Tribuners, kita sudah ngobrol lumayan panjang dengan Duta Besar Federasi Rusia untuk Indonesia, Madam Lyudmila Georgievna Vorobieva. Terima kasih atas semua penjelasannya, dan kita tentu berharap perang ini akan segera berakhir. Saya Febi Mahendra Putra, pamit undur diri. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam damai sejahtera buat kita semua. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan dan salam sehat buat kita semua.